Welcome to Echoes of the Old Ways, a journey back through ancient paths and timeless wisdom. In each episode, we gather to honor the voices of pagan elders who guide us with stories and wisdom passed down through centuries. We walk in the footsteps of those who came before us, drawing on their strength and insight. Together, we explore sacred rituals, celebrate life cycles, and reconnect with the wisdom of the earth. Each episode opens a door to ancient practices and beliefs that remind us of our place in the natural world. We call upon the spirit of our ancestors, those who nurtured and guided, whose voices resonate across time, and whose wisdom lives on within us and the land. Through Echoes of the Old Ways, we invite you to reconnect with ancient knowledge, with nature's rhythms, and with the deep wisdom shared among the earth and her children. Join us, your hosts, as we rekindle the flame of tradition, nurturing the bond between the earth and her children. Welcome to Echoes of the Old Ways. Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello, Jim.
Welcome to Echoes of the Old Ways. Of course, I'm Jim.
I'm Gwen.
I'm Davron.
Rick. So, welcome everyone, and thank you for taking time out of your busy holiday season. Of course, we just went through solstice and moving into Yule and Yuletide season as well. So we do not have a guest tonight, but we are blessed to have Rick with us. So we have been inviting Rick all along, and we're glad to have him join us tonight as well. And he has offered to give a blessing as we start the show today. So we'll let Rick go ahead and do that.
Thank you, my friends. It is my honor to bring a blessing from my studies to this fine ensemble as we emerge from solstice, the shortest, darkest time of the year in the Northern Hemisphere. I want to remind you of that wonderful truth that the only way we see stars is by the dark around them. I'm going to read from Book 1 of Liber Alva Legis because it talks about that interaction with the dark, with Nuit. Had, the manifestation of Nuit. The unveiling of the company of heaven. Every man and every woman is a star. Every number is infinite. There is no difference. Help me, O warrior lord of Thebes, in my unveiling before the children of men. Be thou Hadit, my secret center, my heart and my tongue. Behold, it is revealed by Iwas, the minister of Hur-Parakrat. The cobs is in the coup, not the coup in the cobs. Worship then the cobs, and behold my light shed over you all. And from this, I draw this prayer, this urging. We are the light bringers. That light that is your infinite perception in that dance of infinity here in our earth life. Shine, my friends. And never, never be afraid of the dark. Never be afraid, because your light is the absolute antidote, the antidote to the darkness around us. So be bright as we shed the solstice energy and begin to lengthen the days of the sun. Be that sun, be that star, because every man and every woman is a star. Thank you, brothers and sisters. I share this blessing with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're muted.
I know. It's always Mercury retrograde when it
Yeah.
comes to technology.
I'm over it already. Enough is enough.
Michael A. of Old Ways will always say at the end of Mercury retrograde, he'll post on Instagram, Mercury has station direct, it's your fault again.
Right. Back to being your fault. It's generally my fault anyway.
Well, true.
But that was a very, very timely reading there, Rick, of course, with the idea of solstice and, the shortest day, the longest night. We've talked about how, our ancestors would have been much more tied to the survival aspects of life and the turning of the year. And that would mark the turning point of the light, and how our myths and traditions surround that. But it's easy for us to get caught up because we have the electric light to turn on. We have the grocery store that's stocked with groceries, with fruits and vegetables from every season, out of season, and we're truly blessed. But we are here because our ancestors survived. But remembering that as we're looking at that rebirth of the sun and what that means this time of year is really what I've been settling into and being grateful for those moments. What about you guys?
I would say too that, like our ancestors, though, right now it's a timely moment for gathering together in community for survival, because not because we have to go out and hunt for our meat or make sure the grain doesn't get wet or that the fires keep burning. No, now we have to gather together to support one another and hold on to each other through crazy town, insanity. I mean, what is happening, and it's not just, we are the brightest light blinking on the globe with this right now, but it's happening globally. And unfortunately too, it's directed, a lot of this nastiness is directed at women. So women are challenged to come together and stand together and hold one another up and be there for each other. So poignantly, I'd say that basically we are just like our ancestors tonight, holding together and keeping one another from the cold of indifference and fascism. And shall I go on, or would somebody like to take it up?
In the past, we struggled for basic survival needs. We had to have fire, we had to have shelter, we had to have food, we had to have water. Today, we are very blessed, as Jim says, but we still need, it's a different level of survival, it's a different type. What we need now in this time of darkness is to be those lights. Those of us who are spiritual leaders, magical practitioners, or light workers of any variety need to come together to provide those beacons of light, to provide the virtual hearth of old, places where we can come together in safety, experience community, work together, collaborate, experience growth, share our frustrations, share our joys. And it's not that different than what we used to do when gathering around a campfire or a hearth, is that we need those kinds of places. Social media has brought us all together in ways never dreamed imaginable, and yet separated us more than anything else in history. We've all become very isolated and alone, despite having greater access to more people than we've ever had before from every corner of the globe. And it's time that we start reconnecting with one another in a deeper, more profound ways. Uh, the earth is in a terrible state right now. We need to reconnect with the earth. We need to reconnect with nature. We need to reconnect with each other to influence healing of ourselves, of our consciousness, our collective consciousness, and of the planet itself. So it's going to be a challenging time coming, but as Rick says, we are all stars. Every man is a star. Every woman is a star. Be that star, and let's light the world up as we start to increase the light as Yule has passed, the solstice. Now things will begin to get brighter and brighter. So should we, throughout the coming year at least, begin to get brighter and brighter, because our light is needed more than it's ever been needed before.
One of the things that I just heard, I've heard some really powerful stories just recently. I heard a story of a local minister's wife, a woman who was married to a minister for 40, 50 years, a Christian minister. And I was told that she is spending her time in sorrow, spending her time mourning what is a fact of life. And I know that light bearers, people like yourselves, people out there that we're speaking with, you know that lives are to be celebrated. There is no loss. There is no loss of a loved one. The loved one is always with us. And to spend time in mourning, to wishing things were otherwise, is the absolute essence of not being here now. Being here now is the way to go. And another ironic, strange story that I was just told was a local library where I'm at in the eastern Tennessee. A local library literally is so decrepit that it's being held up by stacks of books that are keeping the second floor from falling down on the first floor. And I thought,
Kind of sounds like my library, but yep.
What a crime of civilization. What a failure to understand the power of learning, the power of a free library. And I know that people like yourselves, you light bearers, you know who you are. You literally shine on tens and tens of people. You are not a light bearer, so you can have a new Cadillac and buy a yacht and fly around in your private jet. You are the kind of light bearer that you are because you care about human beings. You celebrate that infinite light. And that's what enriches this world. You are enriching this world. And take this time in the darkest time of the year, during the Festival of Lights, if you will. How beautifully apt to celebrate that light in you, that light in all those who know and touch the Spirit. You don't have to go to a building when you're a light bearer. You don't have to go to the jungle or the woods or the mountains and sit and hubble in meditation, because your life is meditation.
True.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Well, I see the comments and the names that have popped up, and I know many of our listeners personally, and the light that they share with their individual communities. And as we all share, of course, that light continues to grow. I've seen so much progress over the years. Now the time to circle the wagons and protect what we've accomplished, I think, is very important.
Cribbing, cribbing and saying, from a good author, and saying it's the best of times and the worst of times. It's the best of times because we have so many tools to reach out to one another with. It's not just this fourth dimension here that we are in, but it's also the ability to move swiftly across the land and to get into different countries and share in different cultures. This is wonderful. The other part about it is what we know of, that's happening around us with the authoritarianism, the last throes of patriarchy, basically. And it isn't pretty out there. That isn't pretty. A lot of people are in fear too. When Rick says that people have neglected their library in, Johnson City, I don't know where you're speaking about, Rick, but I know the area. That's a real shame because, a lot of those little libraries up there in those mountains carry stories that, like, Byron was with us, and that's her area too. And a lot of old customs, a lot of old ancestral stories are recorded in books that are only kept in those libraries. Not every book makes it to the Library of Congress. There are books that are shelved in places all over this country, all over this world that tell the stories of our ancestors. That's a real important part about wintertime too, is that's how we survived also, is by keeping one another company. And if you listen to what I just said, keeping one another company, that's a very, very important thing. It because it's a binder. It binds us to one another.
And telling stories. Prior to the written word, the only way to pass on information was through oral tradition. And so much of that has been lost. And that's one of the reasons we're doing this show, is to try our best to preserve some of that ancient wisdom of the old ways for future generations. But without libraries, without places to receive that, I love that all information is accessible online. But what do you do in an emergency when the power goes out? And, we hope such things never happen, but there could be mass disasters caused either by humans or by an asteroid strike or other things that would wipe out the technology that we know instantly, and all that would be left would be the remnants of those libraries. There needs to be protection and preservation of our culture, of our beliefs, and of our knowledge, frankly, and of our stories.
And I think that's a big driving factor for all of us and why we're here, tonight. The idea of, we're blessed to have Byron on, and, I think I can think of other wise folk. Don't want to call them all elders, but wise folk to have on and share their wisdom and what they're doing in their community.
It's quite true.
We were talking before we came on about, I had, in a lot of selfish ways, came up with, the Yule meanderings that I've been posting, and coming up with ideas to incorporate herbs and plants into the celebration, and kind of hearkening back to my own childhood with, sitting around the kitchen table and either making cookies or, stolen. I'm trying to think of all the fruitcake, all the great things that, we just go to the grocery store and buy now that, are in danger of being lost. So I've taken those moments each day to spend time with my daughter and teach her little things, and it's little stuff, like when I was making dinner, I showed her, you can put the broth in the can of tomato sauce to get all the tomato out, just little things that were showed to me when I was little and cooking and things that I think this season is about, because it's cold outside, we're in the house, but really calling each other together into that kitchen, into that hearth, and spending time together and sharing those traditions that we grew up with, in the hopes that they teach their children and it's passed along.
One thing I wanted to, I'm sorry, Gwen, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say, one more time, I want to make some lemonade out of lemons. I don't know if you've heard this gentleman speaker who wants to make sure that people are Christian enough to be in our government. And I got to tell you, I feel the same way about that as I do about these people forcing Christianity into schools. Because I can tell you, in my opinion, there's no greater, faster way to make atheists than forcing people to learn about a stupid religion that really doesn't make any logical sense. And if they force that in there, they're going to grow themselves a crop of atheists like they never seen before.
Yeah.
Anybody else go to parochial school?
No.
I started off in
no,
Catholic school in elementary. Yeah.
I elementary school was parochial school too, because
I'm sorry.
they offered a good education, and it really was. It was classic education. But I've got to tell you, Rick, I met the first light worker I've ever met wearing a habit in parochial school. Also met, an antithesis of that in the same group. But the point is that we fight this one God Abrahamic thing has got people at war with one another right now in a big way. And Rick, your point is taken. We really do need to let it go. Let go of the, searching for divinity outside of ourselves. It's something that our ancestors understood. It wasn't that, Anubis was a god to be worshipped. It was that Anubis was a guide who took us to that part of ourselves within that was enabling that divinity, that resource, that journey work.
Well, I think, you're right with Anubis, leading. But I also think, Christ doesn't, whether it was a person or just an archetype, came and said, I am the way, and was trying to show folks the way. And unfortunately, the religious trappings encircled it, and it became empire instead of,
I agreed. He was, any good Judeo scholar will tell you he was a rabbi. Mm-hmm. His first miracle was his own wedding. This is how society has been herded, overlorded, tithed. It's the opiate thing of the masses, and we are beyond that. We are standing at the edge of an evolutionary moment, and it's about how we think and where we place ourselves in life. Are we sitting at a bench looking up at a piece of wood, or are we traveling within and creating our life in our world? This is some really basic stuff that our ancestors knew and left us a lot of clues to remember.
It's true. Jesus said that he was the Son of God, but he also said we're all sons of God. And that's very similar. Every man is a star, every woman is a star. All of us have that divinity within us. All of us should be aspiring to bring that divinity forth and to radiate it out into the world, not placing the locus of our belief and all of our power on an external authority or source. And we give away our power when we do that, and we diminish ourselves. Gwen, I also, one of the very first light workers I met was also a nun, a Catholic nun. And a wonderful, healing, amazing person. And it always flabbergasted me that she was so dedicated to her religion that denigrated women in many ways. I mean, it worships and honors them, but doesn't allow them any positions of authority, up to a certain level, and puts them in a backseat, kind of a role. Yet, when I was attending a Catholic church and working there, I almost went to Catholic seminary at one point early in my life, believe it or not. She was running the church. Without her, the place would have fallen apart. We had a very old pastor, and she kept the place together, kept it running in a way that no one else could have. And when he ended up passing, they threw her out and tossed her into a retirement place like she was nothing. It was terrible.
I understand what Jim is saying, because we do have actual Christian brothers and sisters who really have the open heart and teachings of the Christ or Yeshua. This is a guy who was Yeshua ben Joseph, the rabbi, who went up on a hill and said, hey, listen, don't listen to these assholes in the church that want your money. I'm going to tell you what. And he did. He did it in a really beautiful way. The guy was like, he was good friends with, John the Baptist, who came before him, to say, look, you've got to get out of this rut you're in. Let me dunk you in the river and wash away all of the past. There was a point to it. And there are very fine Christian people in our country and in the world in general, but they seem to be in a very, very small number at this point because, this has made it very easy for the K Street crowd, the evangelicals, the moral majority. Remember that term? Moral majority?
Yep.
Jim was just...
I remember.
I even remember the 1,000 points of light.
Yeah.
Do you remember Hands Across America?
Yeah.
See?
The thing is that, I think, Jim, what you were saying too was like a very old axiom that is really, really applicable all the time, every time. And my mom was famous for saying it to me, never judge a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Because people are out there who are just as there's Christians out there who are just as frightened and also upset or rebuked by what they see happening with this evangelical. I don't know how anymore to describe it because so many people, and they're not pagan community. I'm talking about people in general who are just completely put off by Christianity right now. Mm-hmm. These are people who are critical thinkers, or let's put it in terms of what the polls have been using, and that is educated people. Well, I've known educated people that didn't spend too much time in a classroom, but they have a lot of common sense, and they were raised to be good people. So,
yeah. And I think a lot of what we can do is find those people, because I know a few in my own life. I was raised Pentecostal. The other half of the family was Catholic. But, I know those few that are out there. Unfortunately, a lot of them are issue voters, that don't look at the big picture. But reaching out to them and finding those common grounds, like even in our, we joke about Christians stealing pagan symbolism, from Yule and from those areas, but they really blended their own traditions into Catholicism, into their Christian path, just like other countries did, with hoodoo and voodoo and Santeria and many of the African diasporic religions, where they blended their indigenous faith into that of Christianity. So really reaching out to them and sharing. I know I was telling a lady that I work with about Yule and solstice and where those come from, and drawing it back into the idea of the Christ child being born at this time, even though he wasn't, and they moved that. But the symbolism, they were trying to capture that symbolism that our ancestors had. And just finding those connections and educating, so that folks understand that what we're doing with our, the ideas of Yule and Saturnalia and the solstice and all of these beliefs are no different than what Christians are doing in church over the next week. They don't peel away the layers and understand the symbolism all the time, but maybe helping them to understand that in our short little conversations that we have with them and building that commonality, so they see that what we're doing over here isn't strange. It's seasonal.
And it actually makes a lot more sense. I mean, everything in our, most of our faiths revolves around the earth. What is the solstice? It is the first day of winter, the shortest day of the year. What is Christmas? A fictitiously moved date of somebody's birth. Ostara, it's a cross quarter, or it's the second Sunday after the death of. I mean, come on, it's our religions make so much more sense. They're more primal. They're more rooted in our ancestral history. They're more rooted in our genetic experience of the world around us. We feel these changes of the season. We feel viscerally our reaction to the world. And that's so ingrained in us from millennia of that survival instinct and having to watch the season, having to pay very close attention to the wheel of the year. And it's good in a way that our holidays to some extent have been co-opted because they or integrated, as Jim more diplomatically put it, because they at least perpetuate and continue them as holidays and festivals at this important time, even if offset a little bit due to man-made reasons. But because it collectively puts us in a certain frame, regardless of our faith, regardless of whether we're Christian, Jewish, whatever it is, we all celebrate something at these times of year. And that enhances the overall positive vibes that go out through the collective unconscious that affect all of us.
Well, as Carol Ann said, it is a time of hope. I mean, I grew up watching, like my sister and I on Thanksgiving will always watch White Christmas because it was a family tradition. When Daughters of Isis was a shop, we used to have a party at solstice time, and we would all watch together It's a Wonderful Life. To me, the story of George Bailey is an incredible story of hope. And it's one of my favorites. I think it is my favorite. Do you remember when they sent out the satellite that they sent out into the solar system?
Voyager.
Voyager,
yeah.
Yeah, they included a package there, and they put out questions to a lot of different institutions and whatnot. What would you put in Voyager? I always said that I would have put a well, now it would be considered a DVD, but at the time I think it was Blu-ray or something, one of those spin old school ones, but of It's a Wonderful Life, because I think that George Bailey represents one of the finest stories of humanity that can be placed in any culture. It's a story of someone who sacrifices his own freedom for his family and his community, who faces financial loss and all of these things that are so, universal to each of us that we've come to. And yet, through the intervention of his higher self in the form of Clarence, he becomes, aware that his life matters. We all matter. Love the story. I just love the story.
It's funny how we have traditions. I was thinking about, I don't know how I end up watching the 10 Commandments every Easter. Why is that on at that time? But it's funny the things that come up and you watch out of tradition. New Year's we used to always watch the different King Kong movies. Why is that?
Gwen, I had an interesting situation with that Voyager flight. There was a sketch on it of man, woman, child, and I was tasked at one point to provide a multimedia show for a symphonic orchestra, and it was going to be playing to 6,000 elementary school kids in Broward County. And the idea was they wanted to have, they thought, themes from music, movie music that the kids would know of. So they said, well, wouldn't it be cool if we got some of the kid art and we could mix media that and put it on either side of the proscenium arch with this symphony orchestra? And I said, that's a great idea. Now let's add one more element. Let's add in some legitimate nebula and constellations and planet shots, the lunar landing, the Martian landing. So we'll be mixing the science vision and the children's vision with this symphony orchestra. And one of the images that I chose of science was a snap of that Voyager satellite with that etching of man, woman, and child, right? Well, the fundamentalists were with us even then. This is back in the 80s. And my boss got a nasty letter from some right-wing hypocrite saying, why were you showing naked people on the screen to these innocent children? So I get a call from my boss, come in my office right away. Look at this angry letter. He waves it in my face. And I said, how many of those were there? Well, one. Okay, so we showed 6,000 students this, and one irate parent's up in arms. I'd say we didn't do well enough. We really should have done better. But you know what? I'm fine with that. And he goes, but you showed naked people. I said, you know what? Let me show you the picture. There's a line for the male breast, and there's a line for the female breast, and there's a slight cupping for the genitals. So I tell you what, if you're offended by that, then I'll take my seat, He goes, well, there's just no excuse to show naked people to children. I said, we're not talking Rubens here. We're talking a line etched in.
Right.
But that is an amazing thing, and even though it's left the solar system, I guess it regularly checks in. So it is interesting that
they had a last beat back from it, and it's left the solar system. I don't know how long ago. It was a while back, but it left the solar system, which is amazing that it happened in our lifetime, that it actually got out of the solar system. Because, when you tell someone you're looking at the past, when you see the stars in the night sky, people stop, stand, and stare and go, you're nuts, I know who will say it and who won't, kind of thing, but you follow where I'm coming from. Our ancestors, in fact, knew that was the past, that's where the stories were held, was in the night skies. That's an amazing thing when you consider how history has described our ancestors as primitive
Well, we may not understand that history.
Well, I don't believe our ancestors were all that primitive.
And
I
there's
want-
too many that talk about beings coming down from the sky all over the world. But the Voyager probe, believe it or not, the thing not too long ago, a couple of weeks or maybe a month or two ago, started communicating again. And so
Wow.
the thing is still working and transmitting after all these years. And Rick, we can expect any day now that it's left the solar system an angry letter from the octopus people of Alpha Centauri complaining about the lack of appendages on this naked person we sent up
We're
there.
sending nudes into outer space.
That's really funny.
Imagine if that was first contact, an angry letter complaining about the nudity on Voyager.
Have you noticed there's a phenomenon going on, whether it's drones or UFOs or what it is? And I understand there's a new, what do you call it for UFO? It's not called a UFO anymore, but
UAPs they use.
oh, whatever. I'm not, but there's an incredible amount of action going on in the skies right now. And it's both daylight and nighttime. And with all of what drones can do now, people are just, pretty much on the ground about it, saying, it's drones. And then there's who've taken some video, and it's like, that's a drone.
Well, JPL says it is as of August 22, it was 14.6 billion miles away from Earth.
Wow.
That's pretty far. And
Wow.
still communicating with us.
I think
Far out.
what Gwendolyn's talking about, I have my theory that it's actually breach of contract, that we broke our contract with the extraterrestrials by firing off ballistic missiles, and that is causing the plasmoids to appear at a point of stress, and the drones are definitely ours, whether they want to admit to it or not. If it was another government, they would have shot them down. We'll see.
I've been studying UAPs, UFOs for decades, and I've seen many, many of them. Worked with MUFON and other organizations, reporting them and analyzing some of them. And there's a lot of these here in New York. We're seeing a lot of these drones. I've seen and photographed dozens and dozens of them. They're drones. There's something. Whether they're not the classic traditional drones, but these are not the typical UAP orb type things that we see. These are behaving very much in more distinctive man-made craft sort of ways. So they're clearly man-made. Who's making them, I don't know. It's frightening that they won't tell us more. Some say it's a government project scanning and preparing us for potential future conflicts. Others say they've got reports of a potential nuclear device somewhere that they're hunting for. Others say that they're Chinese spy drones. We don't know. But not telling us in a case like this is only going to lead to trouble as people start trying to take action themselves. Tell us the truth. We don't have a government to keep things from us and keep us in the dark. You're not supposed to be, overlords. You're supposed to be elected officials representing us. And I certainly understand the need for national security concerns and secrecy, but there's more that could be said to the public here to make us feel better. Like, yes, it's us. There's a national security top secret project we're working on. Or, yes, the aliens are coming, and we did breach our contract, and we're very concerned about these actual UAPs, and we're trying to monitor them more closely. What is it? That just leads to all the more fear, wild speculation, and conspiracy theories.
Well, I've been able to interact for many years with my guides, my spirit guides. I've been able to hear and to, on good days, see them. And I'm aware that some of these are multidimensional intelligence that we would consider aliens or extraterrestrials, especially the ones that click, and that's all they do is click. But basically, I look for my confirmation. An old friend of mine told me, always get confirmation, Gwen. You never know how it might be coming down, but it will be there. And the other thing is, I grew up on the Caribbean, on the water, as a kid growing up, and I've had an experience, and that wasn't a military ship from our government. That was extraterrestrial. Below the water, coming above the water. So from my perspective, there's a reality to, and of course, anybody with common sense, critical thinking mind knows that we're not alone in this universe and that it's most possible. And there is probably lots of evidence that extraterrestrial interaction with Earth has, taken place. I don't know about all these drones, but there's certainly a lot. I've never really seen this much hyper activity. Even we've had World Wide Web for since the 90s, and I've never seen so much, posting of lights in the sky, I guess is the best way to put it right now.
There has been very much increased activity over the past several years, and there's also been more attention to it. We're finally getting some kind of disclosure from the government. But to me, I have studied this for a very long time, and it's probably a better topic for a full show, but I'm not convinced that most of these are extraterrestrial at all.
Neither
I think that there are like maybe two categories: ultra-terrestrials, who are beings from another dimension, and that most of this is more multidimensional than extraterrestrial, or crypto-terrestrials. And it is entirely possible there's another intelligent species living here right on Earth that has lived right alongside us the whole time, possibly even predates us significantly by thousands, tens of thousands, or millions of years. And they're coming out of the ocean. Well, that's not coming from outer space. That's coming from right here. Are these extraterrestrials who set up a base at the bottom of our ocean, or are these a race of Silurian types? That's the Silurian hypothesis, which comes from, ironically, a sci-fi program, Doctor Who. But it's called the Silurian hypothesis, that there's a potential other species here. Homo sapiens were by no means even the only bipedal intelligent life forms on this planet. You had Neanderthals, Denisovans, and Australopithecus, and many others. And how do we know that one or more of those didn't survive, and or even tamper with other existing life forms to create us, leading to some of the stories you see in the Bible and elsewhere in other religious and metaphysical texts throughout history?
There's a lot of multi-dimensional evidence. I mean, there's guys at MIT for the last 20 years who've been shooting ball bearings into different dimensions. That's pretty dangerous shit, if you ask me. But I would mention Dr. Stephen Greer and his experiments and his, all of the evidence he and his groups have come up with. It's amazing stuff. And since I was going to school in Ithaca, Dav, I've been part of the SETI, observing the night skies. Ohio is a place where there's a lot of action too.
Mm-hmm. There's a famous police chase that took place with a unidentified object just the next town over.
Wow.
That's a famous, you could probably find it on YouTube, but it's a little town they call it Vienna. That's how they pronounce it there, but Vienna, Ohio. Spelled like the classic Austrian city though. But yeah, there's a famous police chase out there. But, I think about, stories. I was always fascinated with world history, but the story of the Foo Fighters, the orbs and the unidentified flying objects that appeared, during World War II, and how we're on a precipice. I've believed we've been fighting World War III through proxy nations for years now, but things are elevated. So of course these things, may be ultra dimensional, as Davron said, or of this planet. Maybe it's just Mother Earth sending out her warnings, that we need to back off.
Yeah, I think the multidimensional is an important aspect. Most people think terrestrial, non-terrestrial. I think there is a third option, and many people have hinted at multidimensional beings. Earth is one of the crossroads, one of the places they appear. And the other thing I think is interesting is when we see this, the laws of physics completely violated. A high-speed vehicle that then turns at a right angle and goes in another direction. This again hints to me that we're seeing a part of a reality, but not necessarily something that's really happening on what we used to call conventionally the third plane.
Right.
It's another alternative dimension. People appearing and disappearing. There's ample stories of that, and my own experiences with UFOs or alien contacts lead me to think that they're multidimensional beings, and they interact with us when they want to and when it makes sense for them. And otherwise, we're really small potatoes in the grand scheme of things.
And this doesn't just apply to what are typically identified as extraterrestrials, but are what are identified as many of the mythological beings and creatures, from Bigfoots to fairies to trolls, gnomes, whatever it may be. These may all be interdimensional beings who have the ability to travel here or manifest here and then vanish at will.
Oh, and I think we've all
right.
I think we've all, stepped over into another dimension ourselves.
We have,
at one time or another. So I could definitely relate to the idea of it being easier for them to cross.
Well, Jim Morrison saying I've been doing time in the universal mind. I think he's right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, and to bring this around back to the hearth here, we are. This is part of our storytelling at this time of the year, and our ancestors and elders will tell stories to teach and to carry traditions on. And one of the big ones is through all cultures, the elders have always said, keep your eye on the skies. Mm-hmm. It's huge. I took a class summer session with Joe Campbell, and that was one of the big things he would talk about was, keep your eye on the sky.
Lucky you.
Yeah, he wasn't always at Brown. It was Columbia, down in the hot city in August. But it was worth it because it pointed me in the direction that has become my path.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, is how has our society become desensitized to the fantastic? All of this news that's happening and is surrounding us.
CGI.
And we're just so, well, we're not, but there's so many people who they don't even know what's going on. They laugh it off but we could be at the fork in the road, and could be 20 years from now telling the story, like you said, and how amazing of a time are we living in where this kind of thing is happening.
But they can tell you the coach's stats from 3 years ago, right, and what the basketball score was last week. So priority,
Yeah.
The thing about elders is elders and little children have close bonds and relationships. Yes, because grandmother or grandfather takes care of the children oftentimes. That's traditional in every culture. The elder will take care of the babies when, have to go out and cut the wheat or go out and, fill the gas tank and la, la, la. but the closeness of elders to children, that's kind of precious, because children believe. They have fantastic minds, and elders remember. Fantastic.
Right.
Most of the elders I've known in my life growing up too have had really fabulous imagination, or they've been drawn to the stories. You know, the stories are important. There are traditions. They explain us to ourselves.
One of the worst things and most greatest disservices we can do to our children is to raise them to close off that imagination, to ground themselves entirely in the physical plane and reality here, and lose that sense of wonderment, that sense of imagination, because that is your ticket for communicating with realms beyond and with really understanding the nuances of how and what life is all about here on Earth. So keep those children's imaginations vivid and going. I know I was blessed in never really having shut that off. And a lot of creative people are like that way. And then later in life, they find themselves incredibly gifted with the ability to see and comprehend and synthesize things in a way that others can't. Many of the authors, writers, artists, cinematographers that have written fantasy, science fiction books, movies, much of that, was channeled information that later turns out to be very scientifically viable, if not true. And that comes from not shutting down those channels. We communicate. Gwen, you mentioned talking to your guides regularly. If you shut down those channels, you won't hear those voices anymore. You'll lose a very important component of what our ancestors knew was one of the most important aspects of our life. And, or of any spiritual or religious conversation. So many people go to church and they're there for, a sense of community. They're there for a sense of obligation. But how many of them are truly opened enough to really experience that communication, that direct channeling of information from another dimension or from another source?
Well, it's really incredible because they're there for a supernatural event every Sunday.
Right.
Really. I mean, the incense that the priest use. If you know how Catholic Mass is practiced, and what the priest, a cousin is a Jesuit, drinks all your scotch. That's all they're good for. The point is, he will tell you it's a ritual that is meant to open the heart and open the mind to the supernatural,
Right.
but under their terms.
Correct. I often tell people that the Catholic Church taught me everything I knew about ritual. I was an altar boy for years, almost went to seminary, taught religious education in the Catholic Church, and every single step, or what we would call those keys, they're staggered, layered things: the smell of the incense, the repetitiveness of the prayers, the repetitiveness of the procession,
The bells. There's nothing like listening to church bells, the altar boys' bells. Those chimes are completely tuned to open your third eye.
Oh, absolutely. Just as we would use crystal singing bowls or something, they have the bells. And yet, most times, and I'm not saying this is not, I have seen very, very powerful, say, Catholic masses, usually done by visiting priests from other countries. But generally, what you don't see is that metaphysical experience that all this is supposed to lead up to. It's like my complaint in a lot of Wiccan and pagan rituals. We go through all the steps, and then we don't really have that act of power that is the purpose of the entire thing. Why then are we doing these motions? It becomes very rote, very pointless. The whole point of this is to have that communication with deity, to release that energy towards its purpose, or whatever else your intent was when you're doing this. Otherwise, the rest is, it's like making a very sophisticated recipe and then not eating it at the end, you know?
Transubstantiation.
Transubstantiation. And I have seen some very powerful transubstantiation, but very, very rarely. Normally it's just, you're blessed. I've even had priests tell me to go bless the hosts and the wine myself. And I did. And by God, I felt it. But I've watched many other priests do it, and it's more, yeah, whatever, go. And there's really no power to that. You're not transubstantiating it. You're not bringing forth. You're not drawing down the forces that you would want to be.
There's a regular poetry gathering that I participate in every other week. I'm invited to be one of the co-hosts. And the first time they invited me to be a co-host, I said, so does that mean they can't chew us now?
Right.
Well, it's also when a priest is doing mass, you know, they also teach Catholic priests or Jesuits, at least I know this for a fact. They teach them to work with creative visualization like we do.
Right.
To put light into the host.
Yep.
To put light into the wine, to put light around the church, and to infuse it into the congregation. They do.
But in practice, how many do? And I would argue few of the ones I've personally met and worked with.
Yeah. Well, and I think we could say that about our own communities too. You know,
absolutely.
I've been to circles that have been nothing but what you said, where, you know, it's a nice, you know, call out of the quarters, and, you know, there's a message, but then, you know, we build that group energy, and then we open the circle and it just all dissipates out into the universe without a purpose and without a goal. And, you know, we join in the feasting, you know, everybody's potluck, but the purpose is forgotten. You know, it wasn't just fellowship and calling the quarters. It was, you know, there should be a purpose and an effort.
I've found that guidance. I've been in even drumming circles on the beach with an eclectic group of people. If someone is guiding and speaking it and saying, you know, imagine or visualize, you know, and people catch that. And as the beat of the drum goes or the circle is cast, people are participating. Yes, Jim. You really do have to put the energy work into it, and you do feel it.
One other little experiment I had back in my early searching days, I used to go to different psychics, different astrologers, different healers, just to see what their tactics were, their techniques, etc. And I heard about a psychic church out in Denver, and I went with some friends. Now, you have to picture, this was the late mid-'70s. So we're in the midst of the cultural warfare that was then. We all walked in our commune, we're wearing long hair, we got the fatigues on and all that stuff, and bits of day glow or a God's eye and stuff like that. And we wandered into what turned out to be a really Christian psychic church. We thought, well, you know, we're not going to be troubled. We're, you know, as Taoists, we're one with everything. Hey, you know, I'm not against anything. And however, the preacher, the leader of this group, looked at us and went, "Not my tribe. These are probably evil communards." And I think Manson wasn't too long ago in the news at this point in time. So he sees it, and one of the things they did was they had the children do psychic reading, psychometry, and they were really good because they didn't pull any punches at all. They were just dead on. And this minister is looking at us the whole time, and he could tell that the vibe was such that I was clearly one of the lights of this particular group. And he goes, "Listen, I want to do a healing for you, young man." I said, "Hey, absolutely, brother. Wow, that's great. You know, what an honor. Wow, cool." And what was in his mind was, "I'm going to drive the demons out of you, boy. You're out of here, man."
Exactly. Yeah.
So I go up there and I sit for a healing, and he's like, he's really blast me away. And I'm going, hey, man, I'll be receptive. Thank you, God. That's great, man. Love it, love it, love it. So then when he was done, like trying to put the fear of God into me, I said, now, brother, let me share a little energy with you. And he started shaking and shaking and shaking. And at the end of it, God bless him, he said, brother, I completely misunderstood you. I absolutely judged you, and I was wrong. And these are spiritual people. And he pointed to our group. And I thought, wow, what a wonderful thing, that he was tuned in enough to get over his prejudices. And it was a really beautiful moment.
That's excellent. That's a good story.
I remember how weird things got. I was 13. We were out in LA for a year, living out there, and that Manson thing was really, really affected the whole country. But in LA, people looked at each other. It's like I was privileged enough to live in Boston when the Red Sox won the World Series, 2005. You could sit in the train and look across at someone and your eyes would meet and you just smiled. You just smiled. When a whole place is uplifted like that, it's like attending a Paul McCartney concert and 40,000 people are singing, maybe you can drive my car. It's a religious experience, but so is it. It can be that way. It can reverse itself, and that Manson thing was very palpable, like very real. It drove my mom back to Florida, but I would say this, that we're experiencing a bit of that right now with the fear people have over, the fear that, the division and isolationism is crazy, but it's getting so, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm out there, just looking at somebody in the eye, and for me, if I catch somebody's eye someplace, I'll smile, because that's who I am. It's how I was raised, polite. I'm kind. I'm going to be kind with you. But that's not the way it is out there right now. I don't know this America. That's hard to say. I don't know.
But I think the moments, I was smiling as you were telling that story because I know that that's who you are. When somebody caught your eye, you would definitely smile. And, I think of, that song Hello in There, that might be what somebody needs, to get through their day. And, just when I went to the grocery store today, I can think of 3 people that, I just had a hello in their moment, they're busy, I'm busy, but, we made that connection and talked and laughed and smiled, and looked each other in the eye, so I think
it's really important.
We have to find those moments because, I always think of that, that song, the hello in there that, that person might need, just to be brought out just for a moment.
And we don't need to find those moments. We need to create them. Mm-hmm. I was at the grocery store a couple of days or maybe a week or two ago, and everybody was very grumpy. It was close to everybody's getting out of work, and everybody's doing their own thing, existing in their own little bubble. And I had some kind of an exchange. Somebody was talking in front of me. I don't even remember the exact scenario, but somehow I ended up getting involved, and I ended up leading the little group around the register and a Christmas carol. It was a song that was on the radio. And before you know it, 12, 15 people are singing and dancing, and you could feel the energy level in the whole store explode. And this grumpy group of people all walked out of there happy and uplifted. And that's part of our job, is to bring forth those moments of life. not just observe them, but to create them. And it's often something as simple as smiling at somebody, as Gwen said, when you encounter them and catch their eye. But people need that. Jim, they hello in there. We need to get them out here, back into the world, and help bring them back
Great
out to the
song.
light.
That's a great song to
Yeah.
tie to that. A long time ago, in the 90s, somebody, a store had asked me to create a line of archangel oils for them. And I was working on how to do that. And I was sitting in traffic in Fort Lauderdale on Wilton Drive, and the bus came up alongside of me. And there was this elder woman who was just looking down, out the window. And she looked so despondent, really. Despondent is all I could think of. She really had sort of a look in her eye that said something was very wrong. And when she caught my eye, I, looked over and I smiled. And it took her by surprise. And she smiled back. And as I drove further, I realized I heard, I heard it in my ear. Everybody is somebody's angel. And it was a huge clue to me writing what I needed to write and beginning to blend sense. So, and that's truly what that is, when you give somebody a moment that takes them out of themselves when they're unhappy or despondent or thinking, of someone gone or whatever. When you can do that, that's angelic work.
And it's very important. How many times I don't know about you guys, but many times I've been walking down a street and I've seen someone and I get a little ping. It's not a voice, but it's like I get a little ping and this person will light up to me, and that means I need to do something. And many times you do some little act that you later find out became monumental, if not life-changing, for that person. And it's following that guidance, it's following those voices, it's doing that light work, and it's going forth and trusting in, the gifts we've been given at the price we have to pay to be able to help others, to be able to go out and spread that light into the world. And it's very, very important right now, in more than ever, that I've been alive, that we do that all of us do that.
I think it's going to be really important in 2025 that we remain buoyed, uplifted amongst ourselves. We have to hold on to one another. We have to keep each other, because it is, as Dav says, our job to go out there and be of service, of good work. Gosh, do I sound like some kind of nun now?
I can see it.
But it's true. We really do need to be the light workers more than ever, because I think 2025 is going to be a shocking year.
Yeah.
Well, and I think we can all share that light. Going back to what Rick said, at the beginning, you can't see the stars without the darkness.
No.
We're not just light workers. We've walked in the shadows ourselves. And that shadow walking enables us to understand how important those little smiles and acts of gratitude are, because we've been in those low places. We understand that light that somebody can show, just to bring us out of, even for just a moment.
But that's not to, understate the purpose of that shadow eye you need to give people occasionally,
Right.
Sometimes people need a little of that darkness projected out.
Right.
Well, part of being a light worker this coming year, and has always been a part of my life, and I think Rick's too, is standing and resisting and saying when wrong is a wrong. Because especially with children, these transgender children are under attack by angry, cruel men and women that are damaging them. They are making pacts. Do you know this?
Yeah.
They're making pacts to not withstand this, to unalign themselves. And this just
Well,
Yeah.
and it's standing up for those people too when they're not in the room. When, I often find myself, especially in my work, that I may be, one man in the room of 4 who aren't wearing a MAGA hat, but when you hear things that are said about others, that you speak out and that you say, that's not right. When people of color aren't in the room, when gay people aren't in the room, when women aren't in the room, we are saying the truth, and we're speaking out on behalf of those people, even if we're not going to change minds. There's always the potential to wake somebody up a little bit, but we're speaking those truths in rooms where, those people aren't there that we're defending. But that's when you change minds, is when you're people, think that you're a safe person to talk to and tell their ridiculousness, but then you might have an opportunity to correct them and show them another experience that they're not seeing, because they're not. Everyone's living in an echo chamber.
My mom would tell us that there was no substitute for saying shame on you.
Right.
Shame on
I
you.
would
And I have said it a couple of times in the last few months. Shame on you. And people can cuss back if they wish or whatever, but when someone says shame on you, it sticks. It sticks in the heart of the person you're saying it to, no matter what they may react. It does.
I could see that being a spell too. Shame on you.
I have a similar spell that I use.
X's are us. My mom also used to say, I could remember her saying one time when things were happening, I think it was something to do with Anita Bryant and stuff going on down here in Florida. And she said, Gwendolyn, they're just not nice people. She was talking about the ones who were going against the gay. She had a posse of gay men. But the point was that, they're not nice people. And to her, that was tantamount to calling someone Adolf Hitler, because, she was raised in the 30s and 40s, went to war. She knew what not nice people were. I never saw it. I don't think she ever saw it, or any of it, probably Jim, your grandparents, or Dad, Rick, your parents. They didn't think that this would ever come round again. And it seems like it's worse because it's being so easily embraced. That's the fascism is what I'm talking about.
I was teaching adult ed at Coral Gables Senior High. And at one point they called a meeting of all the instructors and they said, okay, listen, there's been a new legislation passed, so we need to make some new criteria. You're not allowed to give more A's than F's. And if you want to give an A, the only way you can give an A to a student is if you call them at their work and you talk to their supervisor and ask if they're using what you're teaching them in their job. And then they rounded this insanity off with, and if they miss a class, we want you to call them at home and find out why they're not here. Are there any questions? So I started to stand up immediately because this is such a crock of shit. And if that kind of nonsense just is allowed to roll on, it only gets worse. And my friends on either side of me are like, Rick, don't even just do what you're gonna do. Don't worry about it. Just don't say anything. God, you're just gonna. I said, listen, if you don't speak up, it only gets worse. Somebody has to call this crap what it is. And I said, okay, listen, I got a question. Number one, what the hell business of ours? Whatever, they might be taking sailing, they might be taking auto mechanics, maybe they're a janitor, and their boss is going to say, what the hell's my janitor doing taking a class in algebra? Oh my God, he wants to better himself. Let's get rid of that bozo. And I said, on the other hand, you want us to track them down? These are not children. These are grown-ups. It is none of our concern. And they said, well, it's that's just what we got to do. And I said, and about this part of equal A and equal F, what the hell does it have to do with education? What the hell does that have to do with the education of an individual? You're working numbers to make numbers look good. Wasn't this about education? And you'd be surprised to hear they didn't rehire me the next year around.
No.
Shocking.
Classic. Yep. That's higher ed for you.
Well, I understand they're going to dismantle the education. Is it what structure of the educational institution?
The State Department, sure.
Yeah.
And NASA and OSHA and the Weather Service. Yeah. We don't, and of course the FBI. Of course, the FBI.
I've seen my younger sister. She's the HP in the house, and she's discovered TikTok, and she came out here, and she said, "Gwen, you've got to see this. It's a vet. Look at this." And the guy was, well, I'd say he was in his 40s, going into his 50s, and he had on a camo vest, but he had like a haircut like Rick has right now, and he said, you're gonna take the vets' money away. You're gonna take Social Security away. Do you know what an adjuster is? I'll tell you what an adjuster is, and there's plenty of us out here. I didn't really get it until after. An adjuster is the kind of guy like they've got in jail in New York now for taking out the CEO. And they can't understand why people aren't more upset about it. And the other part is too, as we have to stand up and speak out for what's right and be protective of our brothers and sisters, no matter who they are or what they espouse on their own. When wrong is wrong, you have to stand up to it, because those of us who keep quiet or mum or who are afraid to speak are just allowing the elasticity of this fascism to stretch further. And when it's an elasticity that's going on, that snapback's going to be really bad. So staying in integrity is going to be challenging, but it has to be done. It just has to be done. There are going to be times, I'm sure, that any of us are going to say, wait a minute, there's a crowd here who could beat the shit out of me. I'm going to shut up. I get that. We all get that. But wherever we can, we have to stand. We have to resist. We have to do what we can right now, because children are being abused here. They're going to make acts like this. I can't get past this. And then my kid sister comes out with, she says, he's not the only one. There's other vets coming on here and saying this. Have you guys heard about that? It doesn't surprise me that 2025 is going to be difficult, that there's going to be a lot of shocks. And possibly this is one of the shocks that's going to be a consistency. I don't know. But we just have to do our job.
Well, we'll see what the future holds, but we need to be those beacons of light. The more light that's there, the less scary the dark will become.
This is true.
And it's an opportunity to resolve. I mean, it's a perfect time of year. We're going to be getting 1 extra minute of light. So thinking of, the projects that you want to put yourself toward and winding yourself up and out, into the springtime and into action. It's a perfect year to put your plans out there and send them out.
Plus, there's something going on with the Earth's rotation that is possibly going to lengthen the days. So if it makes you feel any better, Gwen, you may have a little bit more light to deal with coming up in the next couple of decades or centuries.
Well, happy solstice to one and all.
Happy solstice to one and all, indeed.
Happy solstice and blessings to everybody. It's a good time to, like we said, reflect and resolve and get moving again. Don't feel like we had much time to
join other people. Get out in the world. Be a bright light and communicate with people in real life, And whether it's your family, your friends, or random strangers you encounter on the street, bring that light wherever we go, because it's needed more than ever right now.
Tell the story.
Tell a story.
And sharing those, life skills with children too. That are lacking survival.
Be close to the kids. Yeah.
Well, they're going to be the ones that lead us into that new world that we've all been told is coming our entire lives. So.
The sixth sun.
Right. The dawning of the age of Aquarius.
May I offer a
Aquarius?
I was wondering if I can offer you a closing poem.
Oh, we would love that.
Well, it's my honor to do so, friends. I practice poetry as a discipline, and this is my what I'm calling my New Year's poem. It's called "The Uses of Humor." When it's said, or you suspect, that all your plans are gone and wrecked, and when you're sad, mad, glad, parenthetically had, or simply by something evil, or not quite bad, you may stutter and stammer too. When you're in a jam, do you reach at length for something potent like a ducal regent or a missing museum docent? Grab a hold of something rash? Now, I'm not talking bags of cash or sitting cross-legged smoking bowls of pungent Turkish hash or some such spice that makes your pleasure soar or roar down gleaming canyons slick as glacier ice. I'm suggesting, even insisting, that you measure another dollop out, and when you whisper or you shout, grab yourself a hearty laugh. And sure, you'll cut your woes in half. Cut them, splice them, mince them, drown them in a steaming cup of berry, pull their leg and tug their hair. You might find a generous touch of merriment there. For when they've got you in a box or the holes of worn through both shoes and socks, lean right back and give a chuckle, even though it might bend your strongest buckle. All these things so tough and stringy now, no more than a pretty propeller for your beanie, or a small mustache painted over the picture of the Master Don. Give yourself a hearty laugh, and sure, by the clover in your garden, you'll cut your woes in half.
Very nice.
Nice.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks for sharing that with us. Well, everyone, have a good night, and thank you for joining us. So as the light returns, may we find renewal in our hearts, in abundance in our lives. Blessed Yule, everyone.
Brightest blessings. Blessed Yule.
And Happy New Year.
Yes.
And Happy New Year.